HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Real Life Guide to Diabetes, Practical Answers to Your Diabetes Problems, by Hope S. Warshaw, Mmsc, RD, CDE, Bc-Adm, and Joy Pape, RN, BSN, CDE, WOCN, CFCN. Read by Callie Beaulieu. Introduction. Real Life Guide to Diabetes. By opening the Real Life Guide to Diabetes, you've already taken a positive step to managing your diabetes. Young, old, or middle-aged, it can be a shock to be told you have diabetes. Managing diabetes is a balancing act between doing what needs to be done to care for your diabetes to stay healthy and doing and accomplishing your tasks and life goals. There will be days when managing diabetes will be more center stage, and others when the commitments you have as an employer, employee, father, mother, wife, husband, student, grandparent, or grandchild won't allow you to complete your diabetes self-care list. As the saying goes, such is life. Diabetes is a disease that puts you in the driver's seat, steering your daily activities to get and stay healthy. Daily diabetes self-care means you're on the job 24/7, 365 days a year. You'll figure out ways to manage your diabetes along with all the other aspects of your life: work, family, social relationships, religious connections, time restraints, financial concerns, other medical conditions, and more. Research shows that you will be more successful over the long haul if you slowly but surely set and accomplish lifestyle changes, such as eating more vegetables each day or walking at lunchtime. Over the last 20 years, new and improved blood glucose lowering medications and faster and more accurate glucose monitoring devices have come into the marketplace, and many more are on the way. This means that it's easier than ever to find a diabetes care plan that works for you. Real Life Guide to Diabetes is filled with information. Each chapter begins with a list of key points covered, what you'll learn. Chapter contents provide you with the latest key research studies, research briefs, numbers to put content into perspective, by the numbers, and definitions of common terms, definitions. The content also dispels common myths and facts, provides answers to common questions, wonder, offers practical pointers, tips and tactics, provides expert insights, psst, and even offers caution signs, red flag. Real Life Guide to Diabetes is divided into 3 sections. Section 1, Building Your Strong Foundations. This section provides the initial building blocks to help you form your solid foundations for high-quality diabetes care and long-term health knowledge and support. Section 2, Create your real-life diabetes plan. This section focuses on the key elements of daily diabetes self-care: choosing healthy foods, becoming physically active, taking blood glucose-lowering medications, and other diabetes-related medications. Section 3. When life happens. This section accepts the realities that life doesn't always go as planned, and diabetes is expensive. Daily life contains ups and downs. You'll learn how to find a balance between caring for your diabetes and doing and accomplishing your day-to-day tasks and lifelong goals. This book doesn't sugarcoat managing diabetes or provide pie-in-the-sky advice. We acknowledge that diabetes care takes effort, energy, and determination. We encourage you not to beat yourself up if you don't achieve perfection. You are human. We encourage you to balance the demands of your real life with those of diabetes care and to slowly change your lifestyle to live healthier and stay healthy with diabetes. Don't delay any further. Don't spend time regretting what you've done or haven't done or how you've lived in the past. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Section 1. Build your strong foundations. Managing your diabetes well day to day and staying healthy over the years require you to build strong foundations of both knowledge and support. Initially, you'll want the answers to a few basic questions. What type of diabetes do I have? What medications do I need to take? What should my blood glucose levels be? What can I eat? What do I need to do to prevent complications? You'll find the answers to these and many more questions in Section 1. You'll also want to know which healthcare providers care for people with diabetes and where to seek the knowledge and support you need. The goal of Section 1 of the Real Life Guide to Diabetes is to provide the initial building blocks to help you form your solid foundations of both knowledge and support. Here's briefly what the 3 chapters in this section cover. Chapter 1. Understanding Diabetes. This chapter helps you learn about diabetes in general and about the various types of diabetes. You'll learn what causes diabetes and how it is diagnosed. You'll learn about why there are currently epidemics of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and about the connection to being overweight. Chapter 2. Know and control your ABCs. Through numerous research studies, it has become well accepted that in order to stay healthy with diabetes, it's critical to get and keep your blood glucose, blood pressure, and blood lipids under good control. This chapter helps you understand the connections between diabetes and heart and blood pressure health and provides you with the target numbers for control. Chapter 3. Seek and find care and support. To get to and keep your blood glucose, blood pressure, and blood lipids under control, you'll need to seek and find healthcare providers with whom you can form a successful and honest partnership. You'll learn how in this chapter. Beyond your healthcare providers, you'll need support from your loved ones, spiritual leaders, social network, and community. You'll gather tips to build your support networks. Lastly, you'll learn how and where to connect with the diabetes community, both locally and globally. Chapter 1. Understanding Diabetes. What you'll learn. To define and differentiate the main types of diabetes, how diabetes is diagnosed, what causes diabetes, the connection between being overweight and developing pre- and type 2 diabetes, how insulin resistance and inflammation trigger pre- and type 2 diabetes, essential details about insulin made by the pancreas and insulin taken by injection. Young, old, or middle-aged, it can be a shock to be told you have diabetes. You may have several family members with diabetes, may have been warned by your healthcare provider that you were at risk for diabetes, or may have had diabetes appear out of the blue. You will have unique thoughts and feelings about being diagnosed with diabetes. You will have unique ways of learning about diabetes and how to manage your diabetes specifically. A word to the wise. Give yourself time and space to allow the diagnosis to sink in. Move to accept that you have it and share the diagnosis with family and friends. You will do all of that on your own timeline. You probably have many questions. You may have just walked from your healthcare provider's office into a bookstore, hopped online and done a search for diabetes books, or may have been recently hospitalized for surgery or a heart attack and told that your blood glucose was high. Or perhaps you have had diabetes for years and are now ready to plunge into action because you just had a health scare, such as a small stroke or retinal hemorrhage, that was related to your years of having diabetes. What's most important is that you take the diagnosis of prediabetes or diabetes seriously and put your diabetes plan into action. The good news is that staying healthy with diabetes for many years is very possible. Diabetes defined. Diabetes, officially called diabetes mellitus, dates back to 1500 BC. Even today, multitudes of scientists around the world are still trying to zero in on why and how diabetes happens, and the reasons appear to be many, and the whys are complex. Defining diabetes today is becoming more complex. The waters are becoming muddy between type 1 and type 2. Consider these examples. Adults, even children, are developing type 2 diabetes at younger ages due, in part, to obesity. Additionally, more adults are developing type 1 diabetes, often referred to as latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, LADA. It is likely that as research continues, particularly the Human Genome Projects, we'll learn that there are actually more discrete types of diabetes. Bearing this complexity in mind, let's start with a simple definition. Diabetes is a group of diseases that are defined by higher than normal blood glucose levels. The major explanation for the high blood glucose levels has to do with either insufficient amounts of insulin being produced by the pancreas and/or the inability to properly use the insulin made by the pancreas due to the phenomenon of insulin resistance. Unfortunately, the number of people who have and are developing both prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is growing in epidemic proportions. It is clear that the escalation of these diseases in the U.S. and around the world closely follows the dramatic rise in obesity. Obesity is directly related to the modern way of life, unhealthy eating habits and food choices, large food portions, and too little physical activity. Today, 240 million people worldwide have diabetes, and 400 million are expected to have diabetes by 2025. If there is strength in numbers, clearly you are not alone. Definitions. Diabetes mellitus, a condition characterized by blood glucose levels that are higher than normal, also called hyperglycemia, due to either insufficient amounts of insulin being produced by the pancreas and/or the inability to properly use the insulin made by the pancreas due to the phenomenon of insulin resistance. This results in the body's inability to use blood glucose for energy. Pancreas, a vital organ that is a comma-shaped gland located just behind the stomach that has several essential functions. It produces digestive enzymes to break food into digestible parts and hormones such as insulin, glucagon, and amylin that help regulate blood glucose levels. Insulin resistance, a condition characterized by the body's inability to respond to and use the insulin that it produces in the pancreas, meaning that insulin cannot function properly and, over time, results in the need for higher and higher amounts of insulin to control blood glucose. By the numbers. The worldview. People diagnosed with diabetes. More than 240 million worldwide. 90 to 95% with type 2 diabetes. 7.3% of adults 20 to 79 years old, average around the world. 9.2% of adults 20 to 79 years old in North America. Slightly more women than men. 2025, estimate 400 million. By the numbers. The U.S. view. 24 million people have diabetes. 18 million are diagnosed. 6 million have it, but have not yet been diagnosed. 90 to 95% of people have type 2 diabetes. 5 to 10% have type 1 diabetes. Women who have gestational diabetes, diabetes during pregnancy, have a 40 to 60% chance of developing type 2 in the next 5 to 10 years. Nearly 8% of the population has diabetes, all ages. 23% of people age 60 or older have diabetes. Diabetes affects nearly an equal number of men and women. 57 million people have prediabetes. Many have not been diagnosed with this condition. Estimates suggest that up to 70% of these people, especially if they don't lose weight and control their blood glucose, will develop type 2 diabetes over time. Wonder? Does eating too much sugar and sweets cause diabetes? Even after all these years, the causes of type 1 and type 2 diabetes are not fully understood. However, one thing is for sure. Eating too much sugar, from sugary foods and sweets, is not the sole cause of any type of diabetes. That being said, the negative health effects from eating a large amount of these foods over time cannot be ignored. Eating a lot of sugary foods and sweets, which contain calories from carbohydrate and fat, can lead to the consumption of too many calories and cause weight gain. Being overweight increases the likelihood of developing prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and related health problems if other risk factors, such as family history, are present. Type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is the most common form of diabetes. About 90 to 95% of people who have diabetes have type 2. People with type 2 diabetes, especially when they are first diagnosed, still produce at least some insulin in their pancreas. In fact, they may produce more insulin than a person who maintains a desirable body weight. However, due to insulin resistance, the large amount of insulin they make in their pancreas becomes a relatively insufficient amount to keep their blood glucose levels normal. Type 2 diabetes does not have a rapid onset. In fact, scientists report that people who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes have often been developing it for more than a decade. This is why health experts now realize, and research has shown, that to prevent and/or delay the progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes, people need to prevent and control weight gain and promote weight loss. Slowly but surely, the beta cells in the pancreas that make insulin are no longer able to keep up with the demand for insulin, and blood glucose rises into the ranges that are used to diagnose diabetes. Experts now estimate that up to 70% of people with prediabetes will develop type 2 diabetes over time, especially if they don't lose weight and control their blood glucose. Type 2 diabetes and prediabetes are now considered progressive diseases, which means that over the years as blood glucose begins to rise, even before the diagnosis of type 2, there is a slow and steady loss of beta cells, the cells of the pancreas that make insulin. Research shows that by the time many people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which may be 7 to 10 years after crossing the blood glucose level threshold from prediabetes to diabetes, they have already lost more than 80% of their beta cell function, insulin-making capacity. If you are diagnosed with prediabetes, take action immediately to do what you can to delay the progression to type 2 diabetes. That means you must eat healthy, be active, and lose 5 to 7% of your body weight, about 10 to 20 pounds for many people. At this point, the ADA guidelines do not recommend a blood glucose lowering medication for prediabetes in addition to these action steps. This may change in the near future. Several large studies have shown the benefits of blood glucose-lowering medications called glitazones, or TZDs, in preventing and/or delaying the progression of prediabetes to type 2. Proper care and treatment can help slow the progression of prediabetes to type 2 diabetes. Don't be lulled into inaction thinking that type 2 diabetes is not as serious as type 1 diabetes. It is. Definition: beta cells. cells located in the islet cells of the pancreas that make two essential hormones in blood glucose control, insulin and amylin. Common symptoms of diabetes: hunger, thirst, frequent urination, unusual weight loss or weight gain, irritability, fatigue, blurry vision, wounds that don't heal, numbness or tingling of your fingers and or feet, sexual problems, men, difficulty achieving and maintaining an erection, women, reoccurring yeast infections, vaginal dryness. It is not uncommon for people with type 2 diabetes to have no signs or symptoms of developing diabetes. This is why it's important to be aware of the risk factors for type 2 diabetes and follow the recommended guidelines for having your blood glucose checked. Wonder? If you're an adult diagnosed with diabetes, how can you tell if it's type 1 or type 2? If you and your healthcare provider are scratching your heads wondering whether you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, your healthcare provider may order a blood test called C-peptide. The lab will also be asked to measure your blood glucose at the same time. This test will be done after an 8-hour fast. The C-peptide test can reveal how much insulin your pancreas is currently making. Definition: C-peptide. Abbreviation for connecting peptide, a substance released by the beta cells into the bloodstream in amounts equal to that of insulin. Testing levels of C-peptide reveals how much insulin is being made by the pancreatic beta cells. Type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes occurs when the pancreas produces very little or no insulin. Type 1 used to be called juvenile onset diabetes until it became known as insulin-dependent diabetes, or type 1. It is diagnosed more often in children and teens, but can be diagnosed well into adulthood. When diagnosed in adulthood, type 1 can have a slower onset and can sometimes be mistaken for type 2 diabetes. There are some telltale signs to determine if you have type 1. You are likely not overweight, and your signs and symptoms are similar to the onset of type 2. You probably are unable to control your blood glucose with oral blood glucose lowering medication, though some healthcare providers may try these first. Your healthcare provider may want to measure your C-peptide level or your glutamic acid decarboxylase (GAD) antibodies, a marker of autoimmune beta cell destruction that is detected in the majority of type 1. While the onset of type 1 diabetes appears to be rapid, scientists know that the development is actually a multi-year process. In fact, people who develop type 1 are born with a genetic predisposition to develop it. At some point, a currently unknown environmental injury occurs that causes an autoimmune response, which makes the body turn on itself and attack the beta cells of the pancreas. Possibilities for this environmental injury include Coxsackie virus, measles, and early introduction of cow's milk to an infant, among others that continue to be studied. However, no conclusive results have been reached yet. After the environmental injury occurs, there is a phase where people's insulin-making capacity starts to dwindle slowly, but more quickly than in type 2 diabetes, and their blood glucose rises in response. Many studies are going on around the world to determine the causes of type 1 diabetes, and also to determine how and when it may be possible and beneficial to intervene in the process to prevent or slow the progression of damage to the beta cells that result in type 1 diabetes. People with type 1 diabetes need to take insulin the rest of their life to control their blood glucose levels. They need to balance their insulin doses with food intake and physical activity. If a person is making nearly none of their own insulin, they will make very little or no C-peptide. Therefore, the level of C-peptide can be measured to give your healthcare provider a sense of whether you are or aren't making insulin in your pancreas. A C-peptide test can be used to help clarify whether you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. However, this test is not regularly done. Healthcare providers are more commonly beginning treatment based on your clinical situation and will change your treatment over time if they find that certain therapies, such as oral blood glucose lowering medications, don't control your blood glucose sufficiently. Wonder? I was diagnosed with type 2, but now I take insulin. Do I now have type 1 diabetes? No. You still have type 2 diabetes, but you now require insulin to keep your blood glucose levels under control. Just because you take insulin, it doesn't mean you now have type 1. In addition to insulin, you may continue to need one or more medications that treat your insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, which is part of type 2 diabetes, continues over time. You may be surprised to learn that 30 to 40% of people with type 2 diabetes need to take insulin to manage their blood glucose levels. Gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes occurs when the body is not able to make and use all the insulin it needs during the course of a pregnancy. Gestational diabetes is on the rise for two key reasons. More women are getting pregnant when they are older, and women are more overweight when they get pregnant. About 1 in 15 women will develop gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes is more likely to develop during the second trimester of pregnancy because the need for insulin rises as the pregnancy progresses. This is why most women who are pregnant should have an oral glucose tolerance test between 24 and 28 weeks of pregnancy, unless a higher than normal blood glucose level is detected earlier, or if the woman has previously had gestational diabetes. If the results of this test are high, then they need to have an additional glucose tolerance test that lasts 3 hours. Higher insulin needs during pregnancy are due to the hormones made by the pregnant woman. Several of these hormones are antagonistic to insulin. If a woman's body cannot keep up with the demand for insulin, then blood glucose levels can rise higher than desired to keep both mother and baby healthy. In fact, the blood glucose numbers used to diagnose gestational diabetes and manage it are lower than the diagnostic and target numbers for type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Blood glucose levels usually go back to normal after delivery. However, today, more and more women are discovering that they had type 2 diabetes prior to becoming pregnant, but it was just not diagnosed. Additionally, the ADA recommends that women with gestational diabetes should be screened for diabetes 6 to 12 weeks after delivery. If they continue to have higher than normal blood glucose levels, they should take steps to get their blood glucose under control. Once a woman has had gestational diabetes, she is at an increased risk of it in future pregnancies, especially if she doesn't lose weight or gains more weight. Developing gestational diabetes is a telltale sign that a woman has impaired glucose tolerance, which puts her at an increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes later in life. Women who have developed gestational diabetes during a pregnancy have a 40 to 60% chance of developing prediabetes and type 2 in the next 5 to 10 years. Women who have or had gestational diabetes should follow the same recommendations as people with prediabetes. Don't gain more weight, lose 10 to 20 pounds, and be physically active nearly every day. Definition: Impaired glucose tolerance, IGT. A condition in which an oral glucose tolerance test shows one or more blood glucose levels that are higher than normal, but not high enough for a diagnosis of diabetes. People with impaired glucose tolerance are at a higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes. IGT may be one indicator that a person has pre-diabetes. Other types of diabetes. Other forms of diabetes can occur, though much less frequently than type 1 and type 2 diabetes. These types are typically brought on by another medical problem or...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?